We'll start the video. All right, well, welcome. Thank you so much for coming. This is week 4, and we're going to be going over grids this week, and specifically kind of picking up where we left off on week 3, but we're also going to be talking about what to expect for the final project and what you have to tie up any loose ends for this last week, because this is our last opportunity to get stuff in. So I'll go ahead and stop the video, and we'll jump right into lecture because we've got a lot to cover today. I'll mostly be doing design demos for you to kind of show you what to expect for the final. Before I get into anything, I just want to open up the forum. Are there any questions? Do you have any questions for me specifically on the assignment? Anything that's come up? All right, well, if there are no questions, then we'll go ahead and jump right into our lecture. So have any of you looked ahead to the final project, first of all? Okay, Crystal read through it. Okay, that's good. So basically, it's kind of we're picking up where we left off on week 3. I'm going to show you a few other things that are going to be required. You do have a list. The grading rubric will be posted after lecture, so it'll be up there for the rest of the week. But check it carefully because this is the one week where we can't make resubmissions. So final is final. So we want to make sure we get everything checked off before we submit it. I highly recommend coming to the multi-session on Thursday, work on this final project, and then bring it to the multi-session so you can just get it signed off and you have peace of mind that you don't have to worry. I don't know, if something comes up, that it's done, because I know usually Saturday night, as it is busy for uploading, and internet runs slow and things, especially for final project night. Everyone's getting in late work in and getting in their final in. So sometimes students have a hard time getting things submitted on time. So just give yourself time to do it. I know this isn't the only class you're probably taking, but just like I said, take advantage of the Thursday multi-session. I'll be there to help answer questions, or I can sign off and give you a grade on the spot, and you don't have to wait all weekend to find out what you made. So for the assessment for final project, we have a multi-page layout. And what you see here on the screen is what we call a double track in the magazine industry. It's a 2-page spread that runs side by side, and it's basically 2 parts of one whole. And it has lots of elements on this page. A lot of these elements are very common in newspaper and especially in magazine layout and design. So we're going to be talking about what elements you're going to be graded on and how to incorporate those elements in your layout. And then we're also going to be talking about, kind of go further into depth about the grid system. Why do we use grids? We talked about baseline grids last week. Are you guys feeling comfortable with grids? Hopefully hopefully you guys are pretty comfortable with it. From the looks of it, those of you who turned in the assessment 3 did a great job on the layout using the grid system, and hopefully that helped you keep things lined up. So, and by the way, you guys are doing such a great job. I'm just so pleased with what's being turned in. Your assignments look fantastic. For the most part, I can tell you've grasped everything. It's just now fine tuning and me just being a little bit nitpicky, trying to make sure that you get it from, an A- to an A+. So that's kind of where I'm coming from on the feedback, but you guys are doing great. So it's really good. And I do appreciate those who come to class and watch it from home. You can tell that it makes a difference. So, all right, so let's talk about the elements of a page, because this is basically what you're going to be graded on. This is the bare bone basic elements that you will have to include. So we're going to talk about how to set up a folio. Does anyone know what a folio is? That's one of the requirements for the final project. Want to take a guess? Okay, it's a good guess. Crystal guessed contents. And Audrey is where you keep the record of your designs. It kind of sounds like that, huh? A folio, if you look here at the bottom of this page, I don't know if you can see it very well. We're not very zoomed in, but where it says folio 2, folio 3, that's your page number. So folio is where it's kind of your footer in a Word document. If you've ever written a paper, you know, you've included a header before and you've included a footer. It's just kind of that right running, left running footer that kind of has the page number, the name of the publication, or maybe the name of the article. It's got some extra information there. If you were designing for a magazine, it would probably include the month of the issue that you were designing for and the year, and then the magazine's name, maybe a website. So that's the folio. So that's what you're going to include. We're going to learn how to set up master pages so that you can have that automatically set up for you. Yeah, I know. I just said she was thinking of a portfolio. So yeah. It's just, folio can have multiple meanings, but in this case, we're talking about the footer of the page, so the page number. We're also going to be required to have a big header. Now look at the size of that header. It's no small header, right? In some cases, on some double trucks, and I'll show you some examples later, the header can go across both pages if you really wanted it to. The thing with the magazine layout is, now that we've learned the rules, we now are going to be in a position to break them a little bit. So if you understand the basics and the rules, you're able to kind of break them in a way that really looks visually appealing. And so in this case, the header sometimes can cut across both pages. It just depends on, you know, how you want to lay it out as a designer. However, we stick to the grid system. Can anyone tell me what grid, how many columns we've got here? What grid column system we're on? Three columns per page. Exactly, Crystal. 3 columns per page. And to go back to your question, Crystal, you said why that word for folio? It's, you know, just in the industry, that's what it's called. You'll find that there's lots of terms in the graphic design industry that they just use the terms that are kind of universal, whether you're in a book, magazine, newspaper, whatever kind of graphic design, it's kind of just universal in that industry. So, you know how some industries have their own terms, that's just one of them. But yes, you're absolutely right. So 3 columns per page. This is the 3-column grid system that they're on. They've got about a 1 pica gutter space, which is the space between their text boxes, because we don't want text to touch. We don't want text to run into each other. We want it to have nice, even breathing room throughout the page. And can anyone tell me what a pull quote is? There's one on this page. A pull quote. Have you heard of that? Pull quote? Okay, so a pull quote is, you've probably seen it if you have a magazine laying around. In fact, if you have a magazine on your desk laying around, grab it and look at it and see if you can find a pull quote. This is a pull quote right here in the italics, the bold italics. It's just a quote or a paragraph, well, I should say it is a quote within the article that gets pulled out. It's usually larger and it's set aside. It's usually acts as a visual element to the page. Yeah, so it's kind of exactly what it says. It's a quote that's being pulled out, and it doesn't have to be in order of the article. Usually it's just repeating what's in the article already, but it's usually kind of that grabber, that eye catcher when you're flipping through a magazine and you're reading that pull quote. Oh, I want to know more. I'll read more about this article. So the pull quote is definitely supposed to catch the reader's attention. It's usually larger. There's no real rule on how to style pull quotes. They can be done in a lot of different ways. I'll show you one. This one's most common. Let me see if I can grab an example. I don't know if I pulled it. Let's see if this one works. Okay, so here's a pull quote here. You'll notice the pull quote here at the bottom of the page extends over 3 columns on a 4-column grid. And in fact, it's in a similar italicized font, but the quotations themselves are transparent and they're kind of there to set it aside. So anyways, they're just there. They're kind of to act as kind of breaking up large bodies of text so that your eyes don't get tired. Sometimes when I see long columns of text, immediately will not read the article, especially if it's in a magazine. But if there's something visually appealing about the way that the article is laid out, I'll be more inclined to sit and read and kind of try to find out more. So that's what a pull quote is. They're designed differently. They could be larger. They're all over the page. They can be different positions on the page. But in this case, this one is done most traditionally. Yeah, that quote was really nice. There's another example I wanted to show you, but I don't think I pulled it, so I'll have to find it later. But anyways, you'll find that as you look on Google or if you search magazine articles, you'll see that there's tons of different styles of pull quotes. So that is going to be a requirement on the final project. So now that we understand what that is. All right, so let's go through this magazine page element article here, because we're going to go through everything that is going to be required. So basically, each magazine page consists of several crucial elements, and we've got most of them here. This image is kind of your guide, and we'll kind of explain each one of those elements. We'll go through each one briefly. So let's talk about the headline. Everyone knows what a headline is, right? We had lots of experience with last week's assignment. So first and most important textual element on a page is the headline. Because it is the most important textual element on the page, where should it be placed? Any guesses? At the top, hierarchy. Thank you, Crystal. The very top. It should be the biggest element on your page, and it should be at the top on page 1. It can extend to page 2, but you know what I mean. It needs to be the first thing on your page. The pull quote should not be on top of the header. It should be below it. The byline shouldn't be on top. It should be below it. So basically, it needs to be on the top. This is the most important element of your article. The headline is as important as the layout. So remember that. After the reader opens the page, the first thing that catches his or her attention is going to be the layout, or maybe some dominant image or typographic illustration. So, but the second thing that will draw the attention and lure the reader in to the article is the headline. So the reader may find the layout attractive, but if the headline's not appealing or very interesting, they may skip that article and continue on. So not only do you have to have it bold and beautiful, but you've also got to have it catchy. So if you haven't already come up with a catchy title for your article, go ahead and do that now. This would be a good time to do it and include it in your page spread. You'll be taking the article that you wrote during week 2, and you'll be laying it out basically. Those of you who are short on the word count are going to probably have to grab more content to add to the page, or style it differently, or basically find ways to fill in the gaps. Unfortunately, we are not allowed to use any graphics or pictures, so we won't be able to use those. But if you've already just designed like your portrait illustration in the same font that you're writing about, then by all means go ahead and use that, because that's a typographic illustration. And then there's other ways to lay out the page without using graphics and images. So just so you're aware. So back to headlines. Headlines can vary in size, and importance of the article really can determine the headline size. You have 2 pages, a 2-page spread, so you've got space. So I want you to use it, take advantage of it, and have fun with it. Now, I'll talk about headline treatments later at another time, but the positioning of the headline is also very vital. We talked about where it needs to be placed. You should aim to place your headline at the top of the page. This is the place where the eye will go first. So many times, basically, I've seen headlines placed at the bottom, and for me, this is just bad design and poor form. Not always, but it rarely works. So place it at the top and give the headline importance. Give it the importance that it deserves. The headline should be set in a bigger size regarding other text elements on the page. So this should be the largest element on your page. Nothing should come close to the size of it. Everything else should be pretty small. Again, hierarchy. But the header should definitely be the eye catcher, and style it in such a way that it would be fun to look at and want to read. All right, so we've got our I've been referring to it as kind of a subtitle, but it's your intro, your kicker. It's also called stand first, or your deck. Again, Crystal, we're talking about weird terms that are in the industry. You'll hear more of them as you get in there. But this has many names. As you can see, look at this, called the intro kicker from the bolder subtitle that follows the headline. Now, as you can see, there's many names for this type of element. I prefer to call it an intro or subtitle, although the most used name is kicker. So if you hear it referred to as kicker, you'll know what I'm talking about. I call it intro because this is an introduction to the article. You're kind of giving a little summary of why you should continue reading it. After the headline catches the attention of the reader, the intro acts as a bridge between the headline and then the actual article, the body copy. It sets the tone of the article and it briefly describes what you can expect from the rest of the article. So intro text should summarize the story and attract the reader's attention. So again, you kind of need to word it in a clever way. Now, if you wrote your paper, it's kind of your opener anyway. So we won't have to worry about restyling the way we wrote our article, but this is just, if you were laying out for a magazine, you'd want to be as creative and catchy as possible. Makes you feel like a pro. I know it does, doesn't it? You can start throwing all these terms around and feel like a real professional, but no, it's kind of fun to learn it, and it'll become so commonplace, you know, when you start picking it up, that it'll be just like everyday language. So, all right, so we talked a little bit about this intro. This is going to be included in what you're going to be graded on. Now, from a design point of view, the intro should be set in bigger type size than the body copy. So that's important to note. Look at the size of the intro in terms of the body copy. Now, body copy, a good weight size is usually 8 to 9 point. The intro font can be anywhere from 9 to 11 point font, just depending on, you know, how much space you have, or it at least needs to be a point or two, probably I'd say 2 point difference from what your body copy is. So you can also make it a different type style. If you set a headline in serif type, you can use a sans serif type for an intro as kind of to add some contrast to your page. That's very common. Or you can bold it or italicize it, whatever you want to do. You should place intro text just below the headline because they work as a team. So we don't want them to look too disconnected. We want them to look grouped together. The headline draws the reader's attention, gets them curious, and the intro text solves the curiosity by giving them more information about the article. So that's why they should work as a team and they should be kept together. So we don't want to keep them disconnected, okay? This is not a rule set in stone though, so just please be aware. Sometimes when you design large articles, the headline can stand all by itself on a page, working as a team with the image. So this treatment of headline and the main image is also strong. We'll get into that, you know, later on when you get into more layout and design. But if you decide to do this kind of design, your intro text should stand on top of the body copy, acting as a real introduction to the article. So set it apart, make it look different. Even look at these visual elements that they use, this bar that divides the body copy and the intro with a little red rectangle. That's kind of a nice style element that kind of divides those and says, hey, this intro is separate. This is where the body copy starts. So again, it's kind of being grouped on the page, and I like that a lot. Are there any questions so far? I know I'm rambling. We'll get to the fun part here pretty soon. I just want to make sure you guys have a good foundation of what's going to be expected. All right. So no questions at the moment. We talked a little bit about pull quotes. They're very useful and attractive design elements, and I really love to play with them a lot. So you should work with your copy and pull out the most interesting parts of the story and then make that the emphasis. So pull quotes serve as a great tool to break up big blocks of body copy, because as you can see in a 3 or 4 column grid system, that lots of text can run on forever for 2 pages. And so this gives it more of an interesting look to the article. Again, it breaks up the large bodies of text. Now be careful with pull quotes, because a lot of students kind of get, I should say, it kind of shakes them up a little bit, because when they put in a pull quote, it messes with format, because it is a different font size, different font formatting altogether. So it will sometimes shift columns. So we need to make sure we are still keeping our baseline grid. Everything is aligned. So just be aware of that. You can use these pull quotes in conjunction with the graphic so that they can both tell a story together on their own way. That's another way you can do it. Pull quotes can be taken out directly from the body text, or they can be summarized excerpts. But that will be, your decision as you lay this out. Now, design related, your pull-out quote should be set in a big enough size that it pulls the reader's attention. So you want it definitely bigger than your body text. That's actually, should be a no-brainer. But also, you want to set it apart from your intro. So you don't want to have the same. If you're going to bold and italicize your intro, you don't want to do that for your pull quote. You want it to kind of be set apart. So you can emphasize the pull quotes with frames. You can put it in a circle. You can place it inside a big exaggerated quote sign like we saw, and so on. So you can play with them, stretch them across a few columns to break up the body copy like we saw in that 4-column grid layout. So there are a lot of options. And even if you Googled pull quote, Images Magazine pull quotes, you'll see how many different ways that you can lay them out. Subheads. Okay, so subheads are used to break up the body copy and give some really clever insight into what the reader can expect in the next few paragraphs. So I don't see an example of that on here. So I'm going to go pull the example we had earlier. Okay, if you'll see your subhead, these little bold, oh yeah, subheads, it was on this one. Okay, so you see the subheading right here. There's little subheadings that kind of break up your paragraphs. Now you can choose to do that, or you can choose to just have a return on your paragraph with an indent. That's okay too. This just adds another visual element to your layout. Again, when you're working with 2 pages of columns of text, you really want to find every reason to break it up, because sometimes it can get really mundane and kind of boring. So these subheaders, if styled correctly, can add some interest to your article. Now the reader may be might be kind of put off if they see long blocks of text, and subheads should definitely be placed to break those blocks and to denote a new section or a new chapter of the article. Now, if you're going to use a subhead, just do a hard return, give a space between the paragraphs. Don't indent. So it's one or the other. So either use a subhead with a return, or you don't use the subhead and then you indent your new paragraph. So either way, you just kind of need to specify. We talked about that as one of the rules last week, but just wanted to remind you. You should set your subhead size just a bit larger than the body copy, or you can leave it at the same size as the body copy, but just emphasize it with some bold font version or maybe a new color. Whatever you choose, you should kind of make them distinct from the rest of the body copy. You want them to stand out. So that's kind of another given, but again, just small details will make a big difference. Now, a few important aspects should also be taken into account. Don't place subheads just below images. Don't place them in the last 3 rows at the bottom of the column. And don't place them at the first rows at the top of the column. So never place them at the top of a column, basically. They don't serve any purpose there. They're supposed to break up the text in the middle. So just never ever place them at the top of a column. They don't serve any purpose there. Don't place them below a pull quote. Subheads should work as a separate unit, and nothing should get in their way. So they need to be kind of away from those elements, if that makes sense. Style sheets for days, that's right. Whoops. All right. We'll skip over image captions, but again, the image caption right here, if you have an image, it usually is another stylistic visual element that works with the graphic. These are parts of the text that should work with the image that they relate to. So image and image captions should work as a unit. If you work at a newspaper and you're laying out, and usually you're laying out pictures, you usually have to say what the picture is about. It's kind of a 1-line summary, what the picture is, who took the picture, you get the photo credit, and then I think that's about maybe the date of the photo. So it's just more informational than it is anything else, but also it can kind of break up text again if you could style it in a different color, or however you want. The copy, you're the copy editor in this case, and you should find some nice copy to kind of go along with it. But avoid placing image captions above the images. This is bad design. Again, it can be on the side, but usually it's below the actual graphic. And again, it needs to be separate from your body text. It shouldn't all run together. The type size should be big, big as body copy or around that size. It can even be smaller or for a point or two. You can set it in a different style and body copy altogether. Again, it can be a separate unit. And let's see, as I said, rules are there to be broken, but you must have good reason to do it. So again, you'll find that a lot of rules get broken in this 2-page spread anyways. All right, thanks, Aja. We'll see you later. Bylines and credits. Okay, so everyone knows what a byline is. We practiced that last week. It's just treatment of these elements is determined by the importance of the article, and usually it's very small. Look how tiny it is in comparison to the headline. It's very small, and it's usually underneath the headline. So bylines can be set in the same size as body text, or it can be set, a few points larger. Bylines should be, smaller on news pages than on feature pages, but we won't get into that. Just remember it needs to be small. Let's see. We talked about the folio a little bit. So the folio, you'll be graded on this as well. It can consist of several elements. The page number is mandatory, but others are optional. So others can be the publication logo, the date, the month, selection title, the name of the article. Just don't overdo it. Format it very nicely. Keep it simple. Few elements are more than enough, and you should repeat them all over the magazine if you're designing for a magazine. But in this case, for the 2 pages, just keep it consistent. Folios should be designed conservatively, but if if the article you're laying out is a non-traditional one, you can play around with them. There's a lot of options, but the biggest problem with folios is when you have a full page image that bleeds out of the page. You should place a folio, you have to consider, should I put a folio on the image or not? But in this case, it's kind of a trick question, because in my experience, I can tell you that to put a folio, a page number at least, on each page if it's clearly visible. So in this case, we definitely want to design around the folio, make sure the folio is showing up on both pages. And I think that's all you have to know for that one. All right. Okay, so let's talk about panels and box copy for just a minute. Boxes are used as new news items or as extensions to a long article that you can place some other facts or data. And in this case, you do have to include the alphabet and the numbers. So kind of find a creative way to include that. You can box it, do a bulleted list. There's lots, from a design point of view, you can do it any way you want. Just make sure that it looks like it belongs and like you did it on purpose. So you can use heavier type for headlines and kickers to emphasize them more. The headline should be few to several points larger than the box copy, and the kicker also. So that should also be set in the same size as box copy, or maybe a few points bigger. But that was a lot to go over. We'll do the design, the demo, so that you can see. Also, look at this widow here. I don't know if you can see that. Please be aware that you don't have widows in your article. You will get docked points for that. I think I marked some of you down for having widows. Just make sure that you're aware of it and you're kind of proofreading your own article before you submit it. This is kind of an easy way to get points, but also an easy way to lose points. You want to make sure you are keeping an eye out for that. All right, as we move on from the elements of a page, are there any questions regarding the final project? All right, everything's clear as mud? Okay, so there is a video that I wanted to show you guys. We're going to talk about the function of a grid. Now, I'll kind of go over it briefly. We talked about it in week 3. Basically, the point of a grid system is it breaks space into regular balanced units. It establishes a system for arranging your content on the page. Grids are also about you having control. Even though you think you're having to stick to a grid, it helps everything find balance. There's a skeletal structure that will really melt away. You'll hear that often. just make sure that you try to pick a grid system that will work for you. 3 to 4 columns is usually about, traditional layout for 2-page spreads. You can do more, you can do less. Minimum of 2, obviously, but just try to pick one that will work well for your layout. All right, so I'm going to get this video set up. And then it's a 10-minute video, so I don't know if we're going to get to all of it, but I do want you to kind of get a basic idea.
What is a graphic design grid? A grid you might think of as graph paper or lots of lines on a page dividing things up into small segments. But in graphic design, a grid is basically an organizational system that you use to help organize elements on your page and maintain unity and consistency. There are different kinds of grids and different ways of using them. And here we're going to take a look at a website that shows some of the examples of grids you can use and also the importance of deciding upon a grid at the beginning of your project and sticking to it as you place your design elements. So here I have a website called designersinsights.com. It's worth a look through to look at the different options that it has, but this page covers, I think, the idea of layout grids in a very simple and easy to understand way. And they mentioned that there are 2 main kinds of layouts, vertical or landscape. Now, I'd like to expand on that a little bit. Vertical is also known as portrait. So if you see the term portrait, you'll know that it's vertical. And the term landscape also means horizontal. So portrait and landscape, vertical and horizontal. So there are 2 basic kinds of pages that you work on. If you're working in print, you'll very often be working on vertical pages and layouts. If you're doing work for the screen, such as for websites or other screen-based applications, you'll probably be more concerned with a horizontal layout. So there are different kinds of grids that exist to help you organize your pages. And generally, in graphic design, grids are referred to by the number of columns that they utilize, okay? They're not broken up as much into horizontal rows as they are into vertical columns. So here we have examples of 6 vertical pages using different kinds of grids. The 1-column grid fills the page with it fills the margins with imagery and graphic elements. 2 columns divides it into 2 columns. Now, these columns don't always have to be the same width. That's something that's good to remember. These examples do show equal width columns, but columns do not have to be equal, as long as there is a certain consistency throughout, say, a multi-page document. If you have one wide column and a narrower one on one page, it would be good to repeat that setup on the subsequent pages, again, for consistency. So we have 2 different versions of the 2-column grid here, and then we have 3 versions of the 3-column grid down here on the bottom row. Now, I recommend, generally speaking, that a 2 or a 3-column grid is the best way to go. It breaks up the space such that you can utilize it in many different ways. It will maintain the best readability for text, and it's really very versatile. Now, here's the idea about a grid. You want to adhere to it with your text and with headlines, with imagery, but then you can break out of it now and then for visual appeal. Look at this example down here, this one. The gray squares, which indicate imagery, they span a couple of columns, and this one goes to the edge of the page. It bleeds off. This one spans 2 columns. The text itself maintains the 3-column grid. So we have a nice balance of 2 and 3-column spanning here with imagery and text. And you'll notice that the headline of this example goes across all 3 of the columns without regard for the columns themselves. So that's breaking out a little bit, but it still all works together. And you'll notice that in all of these cases, with the exception of this bleeding off here and the silhouette of the woman, in every case, the outside margins are honored. Okay, there's a little bit of breakout here, but that's good because this is an image of a skateboarder and it wants to break out a little bit. So the idea of grid use is you adhere to those guidelines with the important pieces, and then you make conscious decisions about when to break out of the grid. So that's the basic idea, and that takes a little bit of practice and experience with laying out pages. But that underlying grid, which of course is invisible once things are printed or published, the underlying grid will help you as you get your skills and get your kind of your chops in order with graphic design. And it will prove to be a really helpful way for you to get comfortable with this concept. The next section here are landscape grids. These are the horizontal pages, and we're doing more of these now with website design and screen-based design. One word here about design for mobile apps. This is becoming much more of a graphic design skill because so many of us are using websites and screen-based apps on our phones. So the layout here isn't quite the same, and there are no examples of real grid use for mobile applications yet, but they're being developed, and they are probably one column based and very simple and easy to read because of course the screens are so much smaller. But let's say that we had the luxury of a whole big website screen to work with. The 2-column and the 3-column are very common here as well. We start to see more evidences of 4-column grids because we have such a wide screen to work with. The same principles apply. You honor the grid, but then you break out of it occasionally, maintaining readability at all times, bleeding off the edge when appropriate. One thing I don't recommend is using a 1-column grid, particularly with a landscape screen, because the line length of the text becomes really hard to read. It's too long, it's too much. People do it, but I don't recommend it. It's far better to go with a 2 or a 3-column grid. And again, if you have the information, you can successfully go with a 4-column grid. Again, this will take practice, and you will learn in time which is going to work best for your purposes. Further down on this page, here's a section about, this is specifically for printing. If you're working on a book that's going to be bound, here's a nice looking side view graphic of a perfect bound book. And you'll see that you lose some of your pages in the binding because of the way that it's put together. And this area here is known as the gutter of your page. So when your pages are laid out, you always want to keep in mind that you're going to lose a little bit of your page into the gutter, and you have to adjust your elements accordingly. You don't want to run text beyond the margin. If you want to have a photograph that bleeds across 2 pages, you're going to have to carefully crop it and place it such that it reads correctly when the book is opened. And professional printers know how to work with this. They know how to achieve that effect given their gutter width. So if you ever have to work with professional printers and come across a scenario like this, just be aware of the gutter and work with them to make sure your pieces come out correctly. Down here on this page, we have something that is somewhat related to grids, although not exactly. Really good to study the rule of thirds, which is a way of breaking up imagery into 9 squares or 9 sections and placing your elements of interest not dead center. They're more interesting if they're placed a little bit off to the side. You'll notice that the focal points here are placed at an intersection of the 9 block layout here. Much more interesting than if these things were dead center. And for those of you interested in mathematics and algebra, the golden ratio and the Fibonacci sequence are mathematical and geometric they are theories of visual balance. And I'm not going to go into it here. It's actually quite heavily mathematical. But the concepts of these golden spiral and Fibonacci sequences relate to visual balance too. So you might want to do research on these particular topics to learn more about this interesting concept here. Lastly, we remind you, this website reminds us to always start your design project with a grid. You really want to have that
Okay, so we'll stop there. Hopefully you guys get a the grid system is, and I'll go ahead and stop this and we'll go back to our slides. Okay, so do we feel kind of comfortable with the concept of grids? Kind of get the idea? Grids are your friends. Don't be intimidated by them. In fact, just already choose what kind of grid system you're going to have. Is it going to be a 3-column grid, a 4-column grid, a 2-column grid? Different types of grids and then always include a baseline grid. So you can see here, there's a 12-column grid that usually is used for web-based designs. The 2-column grids, and then they're all divisible by each other, and then you've got the 5-column grids. This is what happens when you have a 6-column grid. So this is just kind of a visual representation of what we've been talking about. But basically it helps the fluidity of content. It helps flow the content through. Now I found an image online that I really wanted to show you guys, but I might have to search for it over the break. But this just makes the text flow from letter to letter, word to word, line to line, paragraph to paragraph, and then it moves from column to column. So this really helps it just flow. Consistency is the key, so make sure you don't do a 2-grid system or 2-grid column on the first page and then do a 4-grid column on the second page. You want to make sure you keep it consistent. And remember our rules that we've been going over. Rule 14 is just a reminder, clearly indicate your paragraphs. Remember, be careful not to upset the integrity and the visual consistency of the text. When you are, well, I'll just read the second part. The 2 most common ways of indicating paragraphs are indenting or inserting an additional space between the paragraphs. We never do both, okay? If you're gonna insert additional space between the paragraphs, feel free to use a subheader. That's a very appropriate place to do it, but you will need to choose one or the other. We talked about pull quotes a little bit. It's just something interesting from the text. You can summarize it, or it can be a direct quote that you used. Just use contrast techniques to pull the quote out. So use color, use size, font style, placement. It can break the rule of the column grid. It can go across 3 of your 4 columns, just like we saw in that example. So make sure to have plenty of space around the pull quote also. We don't want it running into your body text. And we really don't want it to interrupt the text in an uncomfortable way. We want it to just flow and look visually appealing. We talked about captions. They're very low on the hierarchy scale, therefore they should be very small. This just explains content of the image or the graphic. That's about it on that one. Are there any questions so far? All right, so the composition here. In the visual arts composition, it's always about placement and arrangement of elements. So it can also be thought of as the organization of the elements of art according to the principles of design. So I want you to think hard and have a creative concept when you're trying to come up with a composition for your layout. Let me show you an example of what I'm talking about. I love visual examples. So here's one visual example. Look at this pull quote. I mean, it basically took up the whole second page of this article, but look how visually appealing it is. They use the typographic characters to create some art and dividers in the pull quote itself. This is pretty neat layout. This is a neat composition. Let's look at this one here. This one is an article or poster design done by someone who's designing for the Avenir font. And look at how they placed that character. They didn't use any graphics or anything. They just used the character of the A, and they just let it flow. And then they kind of fit their headline and their body text where it needed to go. So this was kind of a creative way. Again, this is all composition. This is composition of elements becoming one unified whole. So this is very nice. It's very tastefully done. I like it. Let's look at one more. This one I just love. I love the fact that even though it's a traditional black and white layout, to add that pop of color where you need it, they use red as that highlighter color. So red is used tastefully and subtly, but it adds some visual interest to this article. So this is an interesting take on the Salafan font. And also we've got the designer down here, you've got the characters. Now keep in mind, you do need to have all A through Z, 0 through 9 characters. So look at how they styled this here at the bottom left. Look how clean that is. They did the uppercase, they did the lowercase, very nice. They could have included the numbers here at the bottom. So as you're thinking in terms of how you're going to include yours, this might be a good concept to copy. All right, let's look at this one too. This one's a little blurry, it's not very big. But in terms of composition, again, they used, this is a Baskerville font that they were writing about, and they used the letter J as kind of the design element on the page. And they've got your intro here, your headline. So this is very interesting. It kind of breaks the rules a little bit, breaks the mold, but it is still set in a 3-column grid. So this is a very interesting interpretation, or I should say 2-column grid. Let's go to, I think there was one other one. This one's Bodoni. This is an article layout about Bodoni. And I really like this one because, again, they are using their characters in a very creative way. Now, as far as hierarchy, I think they can work on their hierarchy. Some things need to be adjusted, like the headline should be a lot bigger than the actual characters on the right side of the page. But with that said, they're using a 2-column grid here, and I think it works very nicely. And I like the contrast of colors, the red and the black. They're very complementary colors, very traditionally used when you pair them together. So if you just do a simple Google search on typographic article layouts or magazine article layouts, or if you're looking for a certain font, I'm sure you can find article layouts about that font. This is one that I saw that was kind of interesting. This one's on Helvetica. So in terms of composition, they've got the structure here, and they've got their column grid. So this looks like it's a 2-column grid, and they've kept it in line with that grid. So the first column is their graphic. The second column is kind of their headline with their first column of text. So they're missing a lot of basic elements that we would need to include. But overall, they've kind of styled the font in a very interesting, visually curious way. So it kind of makes you want to look a little closer at what's going on. All right, so those are just some ideas when it comes to composition and how you're going to visually design your elements. In terms of design principles, though, we need to have balance and rhythm, emphasis, contrast, all these things, space, proportion, and scale. So I have one more video to watch before we get into the design portion of our, I guess our demo. But let me get this video pulled up real quick. Let me know if you can hear it and see it okay.
It's always a good idea to review basic design principles when you're working with not only typography, but basically anything that you use in graphic design, such as imagery or graphic shapes. In this case, I'm going to focus more on the use of typography as they work with these basic design principles. So I'm going to give you a simple example of each of these 9 principles and how you can think about them when you're working with your text layouts. They are, of course, unity, variety, balance, rhythm, emphasis or focal point, contrast, breathing room, or sometimes called negative or white space, proportion, and scale. The first one I'm going to show is unity. And I have very simple shapes here, and I have some Greeking text to show you examples of how a layout can bring together disparate elements to become unified. And what's working here as far as the layout goes is the way that these elements are aligned. That's what brings these into good unity. Of course, I'm using the same typeface throughout the piece, and that also adds to unity. But I'm pulling these ruler guides down here to show you how different elements are aligned on this piece here. And the most important ones are the 4 margins around the edges. The title and the left side of the paragraph here and the left side of this gray bar, which could be a photograph or it could be just a basic shape, really serve to bring it together because they're aligned nicely. You can see that there's alignment on the bottom and on the right as well. Now the darker gray square here the top of it is aligned with the baseline of the word unity, the title, but you could also extend it to the top of this gray, lighter gray square if you wanted to align it with the top of the title. So you do have a little leeway there. But regardless of which you choose, the fact that these are aligned really tightly and nicely serve to give it a good unity and working well together. We can even get away with not having a straight edge on this paragraph. There's a ragged edge here, and that's okay because the outside elements are nicely and tightly lined up and serve to work well together. So that is one way you can make unity work in your favor. Variety is another design principle, and these gray squares could indicate paragraphs of text. They could be text or imagery, whatever. But the thing that stands out, of course, is the variety of that red shape in the layout there. Now that could be text set in a different color. It could be a red bar with, say, white text inside of it to be a variety, give variety to the layout of black text on a white background, for instance. It could also be a nice way to separate this third rectangle on the right from the other two on the left. Sometimes you have a separate piece of text which is a different topic and you want to separate it from the others yet still take up the same amount of space. So putting a variety element in there, like a different color or a different font, something to break it up, gives visual interest to the page. And you'll get the hang of how to work with variety the more that you do it. A lot of these things take some time to develop, but the more you practice with them, the easier they will become, and you'll start to see ways to make them happen. Balance is the next principle here. And you'll notice that I have a series of rectangles on this page. Again, they could be text, they could be a combination of text and imagery, but they're illustrated here by the color that I've set these in. The largest rectangle is the lightest color. Okay, but it is balanced by the smaller rectangle because the smaller one is a darker color. So even though the larger one is bigger, it still balances nicely because it's lighter, but it balances the smaller one quite well. Then we have the third element of the green repeated squares on top of the rectangle on the right there. And these are much brighter than the others, yet they're the smallest. So because they're brighter, their small size helps keep them in balance. So keep in mind that color and size can work to your benefit when you're trying to balance things. You can have something larger and it can be lighter, and the smaller element can be darker or brighter, and you'll get a good balance that way. And of course, alignment always helps to achieve the unity and also helps with a sense of balance. Rhythm is the next principle. Now rhythm, here's a secret. The way to get a good sense of rhythm in any element you use, whether it be visual or typographic, is repetition. Repetition is what creates the rhythm. Okay, and I have repetition in each of these two words here. The word sail is repeated 5 times in different colors, different tones, so that it sets up a fairly smooth rhythm, but there's a progression there. It almost seems like you start out shouting the word sail, and then you speak it, and then you whisper it because it gets lighter. But the font stays the same, the size, the spacing, everything stays the same except the color. But the repetition is key to setting up the rhythm. And this is a fairly smooth rhythm. Now the word go on the right is a little different. There's some nice unity there because I've kept the same font and of course the same word, but I've changed the scaling, the color, and the angles at which these 3 words have been set. So the rhythm that's been set up here is more staccato, more jumpy, a little more active than the other one, but it still remains readable. And notice that I made the smallest word go the brightest color, again for balance. So we have a smooth piece of rhythm and we have a more jumpy staccato, syncopated rhythm there, which.
All right, so we're going to stop there. This is a longer video, but I just wanted to kind of get into balance and unity. That was kind of the things that I wanted to talk about. So we'll go ahead and switch back over to the PowerPoints. We'll finish this up and then jump into our demo. So basic rules, just remember we talked about the rule of thirds. Just stay out of the dead center. Put your graphics to the side. Stay out of the corners. Those are distracting. But keep a balanced space between the objects. You want to, if you're going to crop anything, crop it for interest. Just make sure you have a purpose to whatever you're doing. And then if you're going to fill the space, make sure you do it evenly. And then have a center of interest, meaning if you follow the hierarchy rules, you will have good, everything will be proportionate and appropriately sized. Also use odd numbers rather than even when you're doing something. So again, I like the 3-column grid because it's an odd number and kind of follows along with that rule 7. All right, you've heard about contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity, and that video touched on a little bit. We weren't able to get to all of it, but I do recommend going to watch it because you will be held accountable for this. Overall, we just want everything to flow and be aligned correctly. I really emphasized alignment in the last 2 weeks, and so I'm hoping that I see some good balance in this article layout. All right. In terms of size, color, shape, and placement, just make sure you create hierarchy throughout the article. Make sure that the most important information stands out, the less important information is the smallest on the page. Also, I wanted to show you in terms of contrast and emphasis, what elements here are examples of contrast? In this article spread, what elements give contrast to this article? What are some things that you notice? The yellow text, right, that bright color, that pop of color adds contrast to a very black and white, dark layout, absolutely. Even the drop cap is highlighted in that same color, so that color is carried out throughout. And in fact, they used it 3 times. They used it in the pull quote, the drop cap, and the headline. So again, it's kind of like the 3, they used an odd number for their contrast and emphasis. So again, it just kind of unifies the look, and it also makes things stand out very, very nicely. Good job. Let's see. I think that was the main thing that stood out to me. In terms of repetition, when we're creating something visually cohesive, we want to make sure we repeat elements of design. So let's look at this article layout and tell me what units are repetitious. So what it can be repeating shapes, colors, fonts, making sure elements have a friend. Just tell me what you see as repetitious elements. The shapes, absolutely. It could be the lines, the dotted line. It can be the circles. In terms of typography, it's hard to read and hard to see, but the body copy is all unified. It's all the same size throughout. The only difference is that drop cap. But that drop cap repetition is taking that green color in that circle and it's using it in the drop cap color. So that's also very creative. Also, another repetitious repetitious element is that they grabbed colors from the image and used it on the shapes. So it's creating unity between the picture and the shapes because they're pulling color swatches from that picture. The text wrap is very nice. It just kind of flows and makes it fun to read, very bubbly. All right, so we hear a lot about alignment. We've heard a lot this mod. This is just a symmetrical balance of information. Just you make all the elements visually equal on all sides. You can use asymmetrical balance, kind of like what we've seen with the, I'll show this, there's some asymmetrical balance going on here, but it all seems to really work. So just note that the visual center of a page, make sure it's slightly higher than the actual center. Let's look at this example here. You can tell me what alignment and balance do you see in this picture? What are some elements of balance that you see? or I should say alignment even. What are some things that stand out to you? I should ask what alignment they're using. In terms of alignment, on the left-hand side, we've got a right justified alignment for the text. Yeah, right alignment, absolutely. Good job, Crystal. Right alignment on the headline, right alignment on the intro. This serves two purposes. The right alignment can also be a way to create the unity, the repetition that we were talking about, but also, whoops, it creates balance because everything is right aligned on the left side. When you move to the right side, everything's left aligned, and so it feels like it's balanced out. So think of a scale. It kind of just balances everything out. So they're using different alignments to create the balance. So that's kind of an interesting take on this. All right, so we hear the word proximity. All this means is something grouped or is it disconnected? If it's spread out, it looks like it's disconnected. It doesn't look like it's grouped. But when things are close in proximity, they start looking like a group. So this creates a logical, visual connection by grouping these objects that's supposed to belong together by keeping them close together. So let's look at an example. Before we move on, the proximity rules are just keep things from moving off the page or being split by space. You just want to make sure everything is grouped together. And then what elements are grouped together in this case? What are some examples of proximity in this layout that you see? Any guesses? The first things that jump out to me are the pictures. Yeah, the images, absolutely. Look how very little space is between those pictures. You know they're supposed to be this kind of unified whole. They're grouped together. Also, the numbers and letters and the characters behind them, not only do they serve as a grouping because they're touching the pictures, but also look at the columns of text. Look how they're grouped. They're supposed to be a subsection of this article as well. So just by keeping things close and far, even look at the distance between the pictures and the image and the content. Um, this serves a purpose, saying these are two separate things. So on this article, now it's hard to tell what this article is about without reading it, but the designer did this on purpose. So there's a lot of white space there, giving some separation to those elements as well. All right, so just for inspiration, if you're looking for ideas, check out this video. We're probably not gonna have time to get to it. If we have time after the demo, we might watch it, but basically the more you see, the more you know. So look, I showed you some visual examples that you just found on the internet. Look on the internet and kind of get some inspiration for this article layout. Recreate for practice. If you find a layout that you really like, learn from the masters. So you are welcome to copy a layout that you've seen and to lay out your article. Well, in fact, I'm going to be grabbing one of the examples I showed you today, and we're just going to recreate it in InDesign today, so that you can kind of get practice. Explore and experiment, and then also seek feedback. So come visit me in the multi-session before you submit this final project, because that'll help you out a ton, I'm sure. All right. Oh, wrong class. Okay, so we are off to take our 10-minute break. When we come back, we'll jump into InDesign. So go ahead and have it launched, and we'll go ahead and practice laying out some elements that you'll be graded on, okay? Are there any questions before we move on? I know that was a mouthful, trying to get through everything. Everyone feel comfortable with the concepts? Okay, we're all good. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and take our 10-minute break. When we get back, we'll go ahead and jump into InDesign. We'll see you guys. All right, so we are back and we're going to jump into InDesign. I'll go ahead and pull it up. All right, so first things first, let's set up our document. It's a standard 8.5 by 11 page that you'll need to have 2-page spread. This is what it should look like when you're done. The assignment does give some specifics, so I'm going to go ahead and pull that up so we can make sure we're going through it correctly. Let me look and see if it gives us any, it does give us margins, so we'll have to copy that. All right. I'm going to kind of shrink this a minute until I can get my margins set up, so bear with me. All right. So if you'll go to File, New, I'll give you a minute to set this up. File, New, you want to put in the number of pages, which is 2. You want facing pages selected because, again, we want this to be side by side. And the start page, we want to start on page 2. The reason why this is important is if you started on page 1, you would have a cover and then a 2-page spread. We want to eliminate that extra page. It would give you 3 pages really instead of number 2. So we're going to start on number 2, and that way it's just one double track and nothing else. The margins, oh, here's where you'll set up your column, your grid system. So I'm going to do 3 columns. You can do 2 columns if you want. You do need to have minimum of 2. And you can see as you increase it what it will look like, but standard is about between 2 and 3, sometimes 4. Any more than that, it doesn't become necessary. It's just up to you as the designer what you have planned for the layout. Now the margins do need to be specific, so pay careful attention. 0.625 inches. Make sure you type in inches, and you'll want to deselect this. The bottom needs to be 0.875 inches. The inside needs to be 0.75 inches. And the outside needs to be 0.625 inches. Just type in inches after if yours is set in pikas like mine. All right, and then I don't believe we have to have anything else other than the margin set up for this. So I think we're okay to hit okay. So this gives you a preview of what it looks like. Everything looks good. I'm going to hit okay. And now I have my 2-page spread. Now, first order of business, you want to make sure you set up your master pages. Why is this important? You guys know, why are we going to set up our master pages? It's a good habit to get into for one, even though we're only laying out for 2 pages. Usually it's something that's really helpful if you're laying out a multi-page document. But in this case, I'm going to go to my A master, which is right here, right above my pages. Double clicking it, you'll notice that one of the pages turns gray. That means that's the page that's selected. So you're on this left page. Yes, exactly, Crystal. Crystal's right. Folios, and she used the right term. We're going to zoom in here. We're going to set up our folios. Now, don't be confused. Make sure you know whether you're on the master or the actual page 2. But the master, what's important about the master page is that whatever you apply to the master pages will be applied to the entire document. So if you apply, there's a left and a right side. So if you apply something to the left side, it will be applied to all left side pages. And same with the right side. So we're going to put in our folio here. The instructions give us very specifics they're very specific on what they want us to include. So I'm going to go to my list here, and you know what, to be helpful, I think I'm just going to grab my list. And I won't apply this to my master, but I'm just going to take it off the page here, just so that I can see what I'm doing. Okay, so the folio, all we really need are page numbers for the folio, so that's all you'll need. We're going to grab our type tool, and I like to position things underneath the margin just a little bit, just in line with it, but underneath it. If you want to make sure everything really is aligned, you could align it to the margin line like that. And then in this case, you'll give it page 1, or not page 1, I'm sorry, you won't enter anything and you'll go to type, I'm sorry. Insert special character, markers, current page number. So I want you to do this along with me. I want us to get our folios set up on our master pages. So go ahead and practice setting up your new document according to the specs that we were given for our assignment. And then make sure it's a 2-page spread. And then I want you to make sure that you've inserted your folio. So click on current page. Now you'll notice that no number displays here, but if you go to page 2, it's automatically numbered for you. So that's really helpful. Next thing, and then you can format this. So I'm going to, you want your page number to be on the outside of the page always. So along with this, you don't have to include this, but I'm going to go ahead and tab over, and I'm going to give it the title of my article. Helvetica will be the title of my article. Kind of tab it over. And then this is your chance to format it. So I'm going to format it by giving it a Helvetica. And I'm going to give it a smaller font size. It doesn't need to be the star of the show. Maybe I'll do a light or a bold, whatever stands out, seems to stand out. So I'll do that. I might give it a different shade, a different color even. So I'll do 60% on my black. So there we go. There's my folio. I can even choose to put it down a little bit so it's down by that page. I'm going to copy this over. Oops. You can copy and paste or just redraw it from scratch, but you will need to rotate them, meaning you'll need to flip them. The name of the article on the inside of the page, and the exterior of the page will have the page number. So I'm just going to tab over. I'm going to go to type, insert special character, markers, current page number, and I'll set that up. Okay. All right, so now I've got my page numbers all set up. They're evenly placed. Look how beautifully aligned that looks. Very nice. Now if I go to page 2 and 3, you can see that's already been placed for me. And what's nice about this is that I won't be able to grab it on page 2 and 3. If I want to edit it, I have to go back to my master pages where it's placed. You'll notice that any design element on the master page is in the form of a dotted line, so you'll know that this is a master element. So we'll go back to page 2. If you ever need to override a master page element, you just right-click on page 2, click on Override All Master Page Items, and then this will allow you to make it editable on that page only. Okay, so I'm going to give you 2 minutes. I want you to set up your document, your 2-page spread, and I want you to set up your folios, okay? All you need is the page number, but in this case, I went ahead and gave it some balance by adding the name of the article as well. So I'll give you 2 minutes. If anyone would like to share their screen to kind of show me how they did it, that would be great. Or just show me that you did it, that's even better. And then we'll move on. Okay. So again, I'm going to just grab my list here, just so I have it. So make sure I kind of go down the line of what I need. Oh, Crystal's on her laptop again. Okay, that's right, Crystal. That's okay. Ashley, if you want to share, that'd be great. Otherwise, I can just continue. If you're following along, that's wonderful. All right, I'm just going to have, this might be a good habit to get into, just grab that list of requirements and we're going to check them off as we go. So if you're not able to share your screen, Crystal, no problem. We'll go ahead and move forward. So the layout that I'm going to do is kind of a mix between these two. I might try this Helvetica one. I saw this was a cool way to display the characters. So I'm going to expand it. So that it covers the entire page. And I'm going to grab my layers. So go to Window, Layers. Layer 1 will be my background or my example layer. And on this layer, I'm going to place the example. And then on layer 2 is when I'll actually do my text. All right, so when I'm on my second layer, I won't be able to mess with this. I can lock it. But what I'm going to do is set the opacity down a little bit so I can see what I'm designing over. I'll lock it, so now I can't grab it, and I'll move on to my text layer. I'll zoom in. We'll start with the first page. So I kind of want to align it where letters aren't getting cut off. So I should probably go back here where it's kind of split in the middle there. All right. I'm going to leave this nice and large. All right, I think I'm ready to begin. All right. So first things first is the actual font that I'll need. I'm going to grab my type tool, and I'm going to have to do this in stages. So HE, I'm going to get my Helvetica and decide what kind of font I want to do. I'm going to grab the heaviest one I can find because I want it to be nice and thick. And I'm going to increase the font size until I'm happy with it. All right, and just kind of eyeball it. It doesn't have to be perfect. I just want everything to line up. Now I need to do the L. I could probably add the L in here. There we go. And that's all I need for that. Now I need to be able to line up the line. I want the L to go all the way up. So I'm going to go to Type, Create Outlines. Remember, when you do this, it's no longer editable from a type standpoint. So just be sure that you either make a copy of it or you're sure that you want it to be permanent. I'm going to ungroup it. Double click on my L here. And I'm going to grab on each anchor point and I'm just going to raise it up. Holding down Shift will help me keep the proportion accurate. And then my ruler and smart guides are on, so that helps me to stay lined properly. Okay, so there we go. There's my L. It's been extended. Now I'm going to have to do some crazy vertical tricks here. The way that you approach something that runs vertical is you always do it horizontal and then flip it. So I'm going to do my characters 1, 2, 1, or I guess 0 through 9. There we go. And I'm going to format it in Helvetica font. And I'm going to do a light on it because I want to add contrast to that bold. I'm going to do a light on it. Again, I'm going to increase the size. I don't want it too big. Kind of spread it out a little bit. Then I'm going to go to Type, Create Outlines. Now, it doesn't have to match up perfectly with theirs. I just want it to look nice for mine. Bring that in a little bit. All right, so now I've got my numbers. And now it's time for the rest of the word, Helvetica. Remember, I'm using Helvetica. I remember the same style I'm using. I'm going to go to Type, Create Outlines. With my smart guides on, this really makes it easy. When you're rotating something, hold down Shift so that it's always proportional. There we go. Helvetica. And then I want to line up this bar with the dot of my eye. So the dot of my eye is actually going to be that extended bar. So I'm going to grab the anchor points on this, hold down Shift as I reach it across the page. I'm gonna grab the other anchor point. Oops. Hold down Shift. And that allows me to keep a very nice line. So that kind of becomes my dotted line. Next, I'm going to do the same thing I did with my numbers. In this case, I'm going to use my letters as, I'm going to use uppercase and lowercase. Okay, there's all of the uppercase letters. Again, I'm going to have to format it. So Helvetica, I'm going to go to light because I want that contrast. I might spread them out, adjust my tracking a little bit. And then I'm going to go to type create outlines. And I'm just going to kind of line it up, kind of eyeball it with theirs. Oops, too big. Perfect. All right, so that's nice and lined up. Now I'm going to do the same with my lowercase letters. Would it be weird? It wouldn't read right. It's that would be entirely up to you. If it was upside down, would they almost look backwards? I guess, or maybe the mirror image. You could do it if you felt like that was going to be a stylistic element you wanted to include. You're the designer. Sometimes you never know if it's going to actually look good until you've actually applied it. There's several times where I think a concept in my head will actually be kind of cool, and then when I put it down on paper, or I guess digitally put it down on paper, it doesn't always translate. So sometimes it just takes some playing with to see if it would actually work out. So you should try it. I bet it would. I bet it could look pretty cool. So I'm going to give a space. I'm going to go to type create outlines. Yeah, it shouldn't be touching the bar. In this case, I'm kind of eyeballing the design. I'm not really staying true to what they've done. I'm going to give it even amount of space. Oh, I don't want to stretch. No stretching. Oops. Okay, so everything lines up. I don't like how it touches the bar either, so we're going to give it some space. I might have to move this up so that it all has even amount of space. There we go. All right, so this is nice and formatted. I've got my numbers. So if I go back to my list, let's go back to our list. I've got my headline. So let me, oh, that was on my, so I've got my headline, check. Let's see, I've got my portfolio done. The name of the magazine, oh yeah, you do need to include that. It needs to say typography instead. So instead of Helvetica, that should say typography. So if we go back to our master pages and set that up, there we go. Perfect. All right, so that's all fixed. All right, let's go back to page 2. somewhere in your article, you need to display the both upper and lowercase figures and 0 through 9. I did that. Use regular. Okay, so we'll get there. All right, so now I've whittled down my to-do list, so that's good. Now I just need to include my byline. That's something easy I can add. This will be by Mrs. Woodland, because I wrote the article. Everything's going to be in Helvetica at this point, except my body copy. My body copy, I highly recommend using a serif font. Even if your font is a sans serif font that you wrote about, body copy should usually always be set in a sans serif font because it's easier to read. So that'll be my contrasting font. Let's see, Helvetica, I'll just do a regular, and I'll do size 12, that's fine. And it can even be small. I think I'll make it smaller. I'll make it the width of the H so everything looks balanced like that. I could even italicize it if I really wanted to. That kind of gives it some interest. Whatever you want to do. So it just needs to be small and it needs to be included. So my byline is done, check. I'll need a subhead that will be part of my body copy. Okay, now it's time to lay out the columns of text, okay? Depending on how long your article is, you can cut some content or you can add content, whatever you need to do. I'm going to add this right here. I want all my columns of text to end and begin at the same place. Okay, you can either draw each column of text or you can just copy and paste them and lay them out. They're all the same size, as you can see. This is very uniform, just like that, okay? Now, with each one, remember I did this in week 3. I'm gonna zoom in so you can see. You click on this bottom right anchor point right here. See that my icon shows that there's some text there. I'm gonna click on each article. And then I'm going to click on each column to make sure it all flows into each other. All right, so now they're all connected. What that did was say, I want this to all be connected. So when I flow in my article, in this case, I'm just going to fill with some placeholder text because I don't have an article, to write, but I'm going to show you how to format your body text. So now that everything is flowed in here, I'm going to highlight it. Now remember we went over the rule, body text type should be about 8 to 9 point font. I'm going to do about an 8-point font. I'm going to do Times New Roman or Minion Pro. Just pick a serif font that is legible and traditional. And then I'm going to fill with placeholder text again. So we've got it all filled in. It looks nice. I'm going to go looking for widows after I add subheads. So I think you do need to, subheads are optional, so you don't have to. So in this case, remember it was the either or rule, right? So if we're going to add a subhead, we're going to give space. Always make sure there's that gap of space there. You can either do all caps or lowercase, whatever you want. And remember, this is usually a size or 2 bigger, and it's usually in a different font. It's usually a different color too. With black, I'm going to use a nice red as an accent, as a pop of color. So this is a good way to add some subheads. Oops. If you choose not to use a subhead, just make sure you indent the first line of your paragraph. Okay, now don't do that if there's a break there. We'll just need to figure out something else. Okay. Just kind of going through the paragraphs and adding the subheaders where they need to go. Okay, there we go. There's that. Subheaders have been included. Check. Body copy. I've got my body copy pulled in. Now I just need my pull quote. and I need to somehow include regular, book, and Roman in here. Now, it can be done in the way that you're formatting it, or you can actually type it in and make it part of your style. So I thought something cool as a visual element would be to just type out the word Helvetica and do Helvetica Light. Helvetica Regular. Bold. And then what's the other one? Oh, medium. And the other one is semi-bold. And then bold. And then I'll format these. I'm going to make them large because they're going to be part of my design element. Helvetica Light will be Helvetica Light. Helvetica Regular, I'll format in the regular. Helvetica Medium, kind of what we saw in the video. Hang on. So we're going to find my Helvetica Medium. There we go. Helvetica Semi-Bold. I have so many versions of Helvetica on here, it's not even funny. Okay, Semi-Bold, wherever it is. Probably all the way down. You guys see it? Well, now I don't see it, but I had it. Oh well. All right, well, we'll ignore that. Just do bold then. Nope, that's okay. I just, for some reason, can't find it. And then Helvetica, I think it's heavy. I'll just add an extra one. Like that. Okay. So then I can kind of extend this a little bit. Give some space in between it. Maybe not that much space. And I'm going to make this red because I want to add a pop of color. And this is going to be a design element. And I'm going to grab a little line here to kind of give it some interest. Just like that. Okay, so there's some visual interest there. Now I could either choose to I can choose to move it to the other side of the page. It looks so lonely there. Let's see if it even looks good. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, we could put it there. That would look, it just depends. I just want it to line up. And then reserve the left side for the pull quote. So we've got, I've already kind of fulfilled the Roman book requirements. And that is all done. Last thing I need to do is my pull quote. So my pull quote is going to be that awesome quote in my, just grab some text. Usually a pull quote is short. and it's usually much larger. So I'm going to make it large, and I'm going to make it Helvetica. I think I'm going to do a regular. No, I don't like that. I don't like the condensed versions very well. There we go. All right, so there's my pull quote. It's a lot larger than my body text. I'm going to make sure I'm going to format it over here. Probably this side's so lonely. I'm going to right align it. Now you can do two things. You can separate, I could have it going across these two columns, or I could just have it go across this one column, or I could have it go across, you know, break up my text here. But I already have subheads, and so you'll notice if you try to break something up with subheads, it doesn't look as good. If you chose not to use subheads, and this would probably be a better place to put the pull quote within the article, but since you already have a visual element already, which is the subheader, you don't need the pull quote to be in your body copy. In case it, and instead it probably serve a better purpose if it was extended. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to center it, and then I'm going to grab do a pull quote, or I'm going to grab quotes. I'm going to use a serif quotation mark, I should say, because they tend to look a little better than the tick marks of a sans serif font. And I'm going to try to do Times New Roman because I like the way the quotes actually look. There we go. I'll make these red or black. I might keep it black. And then I'm going to go to Type, Create Outlines. And you can do two things. You can have it kind of frame them, or you can put it behind it and just adjust the opacity. Send it to the back. Kind of add some visual interest there. Remember, hold down Shift as you rotate. All right, so there's my pull quote. Looks nice. I'm going to, the only thing I'm going to do is make sure my ruler lines up with it. I grab my rulers. And I'm going to line these elements here. Like that. All right, so now everything is kind of visually aligned. I no longer need my background, I no longer need my background image, so I can just get rid of that now. I have the basics of what I want to do. The only thing that's left is to kind of fine tune it. I'm going to either need to do two things. Move my column down and give this some breathing room, or I can do a text wrap. So if you, let's see, if you right click on it, on the element that you want to text wrap, and go to wrap around bounding box. That's not what I want. Let's try this. Actually, the problem with this is it's going to, because I extended the eye, it's going to make everything wrap around. So what I'm going to do is something a little different. I'm going to grab a shape, like a rectangle, kind of draw a little rectangle here by the A. And then I'm going to click on text wrap. So now that my text will wrap around it instead. And I do need to format it a little bit because I want to make sure there's breathing room on both sides of the text. Now, by doing a text wrap, you will shift some things. So you need to kind of go in and make sure you get rid of those widows. I want to make sure everything looks nice and aligned. See up here, there's a little widow here hanging out at the end because I moved everything. So I need to, you know, either give it some extra text or get rid of it. Here's another widow. You'll need to kind of make sure you get rid of them. Okay, now that I've checked my formatting, everything looks good. I've got my basic layout done. Now here is where you could choose to put in your graphic if you really wanted to. This could be your face illustration. Let's see. You could put in your face portrait here, or you could make it the art on this side instead. Just kind of play around with where you want to include that. That's also an option. You don't have to include it at all, but if you're looking for something to kind of fill space, that would be something to include. This is just kind of a basic layout. We've included everything that we needed. Please note that my folio is a different color than my body text. It's a light gray. I can even go so far as to lighten it up even more so it's not, change the opacity a little bit so it's not so noticeable. Oops, okay. But it's up to you, as long as it's there and legible. That's the overall layout. Again, I just found this layout online and I was able to use it to kind of fit my content. So try your best to kind of find a layout and try to copy it. Just remember, we want to be able to practice what other people are doing, so then we'll get the hang of the balance. Are there any questions about this at all? No questions? Okay. If there aren't any questions, then I'll also move on to, let me add another page. This will be the next one. Last thing that we want to do is be able to, upload it properly, and it says PDF. So the way that you'll do a PDF spread, there's a difference between uploading a PDF and making sure that your PDF displays in a spread, is if you go to File, Adobe PDF Presets, go to smallest file size. We want it small so that it will upload quicker. The larger it is, it'll take forever for you to upload and forever for me to download. Save it, give it a name. Just according to the rubric, hit save. And then here is where your PDF presets are. You give the range of what you want, page 2 and 3, that's the range. Make sure it says small file size. Let's see, also you want spreads. You want to make sure spreads is selected and not pages. So spreads will give you the 2-page spread display, and that's what we want. We want that 2-page spread display. Marks and bleeds, you can click all printer marks, and that will add all the printer marks to it, makes it look nice and professional. And I think that's all you need. So then you hit export and hit OK. It'll give you some kind of, maybe some dialog boxes will pop up, but that's all you have to do. And then your photo, let me see if I can switch gears to my desktop. Hold on one sec. I can show you what it looks like. Once you convert the PDF, hang on, well, let me do it just yet. There it is. Okay, so sharing my screen with my PDF is very small. I'll try to make the window a little bit bigger. But look how it's displaying now. It's already displaying in the 2-page spread, and that's what I want to see with your design. So remember, make sure that spreads is checked when you're converting it to a PDF, okay? And that will also be part of it. One thing that you will need to double check as you're laying things out is, let me go back to InDesign, is remember we got to set up our baseline grid. That's very important too. Your headline may not fit in that baseline grid, but your body copy definitely should. So remember, if you go to, let's see, it was preferences, grids, and then you set this according to whatever you have it. So the start will be whatever the top of the margin is. I believe it was 0.625 inches. So you'll put that in, top of the page. I don't know what my letting is, so I'll have to double check that. Remember, threshold could be something low, like 20%. and then hit OK. I'm going to check my leading so I can go back in there. So my leading is 9.6, so I'll have to go back to my preferences and just match up my increment every to my leading, 9.6. Okay, hit OK, and then go to View, Show Baseline Grid. There we go. So now I've got my baseline grid. Now this is where I'll need to kind of make sure everything's lined up and formatted correctly. So I'll click on all of my columns of text, hold down Shift as you select each one, and then I want to go to Align Base or Balance Columns, like that, so everything can be balanced. Then I'm going to highlight everything, go to my paragraph, control settings, right up here, top left, or you can find it under your window, type in tables, paragraph, right here. Then I'm going to click on Align to Baseline Grid. And there you go, everything shifts in its proper place. Now, because of that shifting, things did shift up here. So if you can see, it kind of moved things down. So I'm going to kind of bring that up. Make sure everything's lined up. So now everything is lined up perfectly to that baseline grid as far as my columns of text go. The only thing that I forgot to add is my drop cap, and we're definitely going to want that. So I'm going to do a 3-line drop cap, and I'm going to give that drop cap a color because I want that to stand out. And again, we have so much black and white on the page that I really want everything to look nice. And I'm going to fix the gaps that this gave me so that it's visually appealing. There we go. All right. All right, guys, that's all that's left. This is a pretty solid layout. You do need to design in color, but feel free to be creative with the way that you do color. I mean, you could even turn this into red if you wanted to, and that would kind of add some element of color to your design. But I want you to get creative. I want you to think of ways that you can make this interesting visually. So are there any questions before we move on with this demo? I think I went over every element that you'll have to have included. So far, so good. Okay, so we're going to stop share. That concludes the demo for today. I do have one last thing that I wanted to go through, and that was this this video, but I don't know if we're going to have time for it. So we might just end here. Thank you guys for coming. I really appreciate your participation and for you guys being so attentive. Email me if you have any questions. I also wanted to throw out there that on Thursday at the multi-session, bring your assignment. So if you can get started on it ahead of time, go ahead and bring it to me and we can work on it together, check it off. This is kind of your last week to do so. Also, if I'm not available, if my schedule doesn't work with yours, as far as the multi-session is concerned, there's other multi-sessions going on this week by other instructors. You're more than welcome to join. You don't have to be in their class to get help. We all act as tutors for all classes. And then the Student Success Center is also available. Please use them. I think they're even open on Saturdays. So if you work and Saturday's the only day you can get to it, it's definitely a must. Go visit them and get the help you guys need. Turn in any late week 3 work, and this is the last Saturday you can do that. We're not accepting week 1 or week 2 work anymore. No more resubmissions on those 2 weeks. Only week 3 and week 4 are we going to be focusing on. So just be aware of that. Keep up with the daily checkpoints. Oh, and then one last thing. Remember, we don't have a discussion this week, but we do have a reflection. It's just I think it's a 3-question quiz about, how did you do in the class, and just give some honest input, but give some detailed feedback too, so that we can grade you properly and just make sure everything's spelled correctly, good grammar, and this should be a pretty easy grade. So are there any questions before we end here? Are we good? All right, none here. Perfect. Well, you guys are free to go. We will see you Thursday, hopefully. Hopefully everyone can come on Thursday and get things signed off. Thanks, guys, for coming. Have a great night. Thanks, Crystal. We'll see you later. Night, Ashley. Thank you.